Well, hello and welcome to Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined, as always, by Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development, my co-host for this series. Scott, I'm right now in the Philadelphia region for the first annual East Coast Hunters Convention. It has been a packed show, like an absolute smashing success. There's so many folks here that we know in the industry and a few listeners that I have seen that have said hi to me, which was always great. I'm sorry if I was too much of a zombie already to reply to you, but this is the reply. It took me a few days.
Well, it's funny because I've seen so much on social media in general about the show, and it looks like it's a great show. It looks like everyone's having a good time. You're right; it looks like it's absolutely packed, and I have a couple friends who are vending there for the first time, and just to kind of test things out, and I think that's super fun. I'm really bummed that I couldn't be there myself. So for all of you who are there, who are listening to the show, hi, sorry I'm not there. But I've just been doing so much traveling recently that I needed some time to actually, do my work. So I decided it would be in my best interest not to be there. Chances are good I will try to get there next year if the show continues, but based on everything that I've seen and heard, looks like it's the kickoff for something that will be around for a while.
Yeah. Okay, well, to the news, as they say, and I think the first story here, I think that we definitely have to talk about because it's important news, but I don't think we need to, catastrophize about it. But of course, I'm sure everyone is aware of the tram crash that injured 15 at Universal Studios Hollywood. I'll read a little bit here from the excellent story from Theme Park Insider. It's always difficult because not too many people, cover these stories in a good way. And I always think that Robert does a good job over there. So I'll read some excerpts from his article here. The Los Angeles County Fire Department responded to the collision just after 9 p.m. Pacific time. The fire department reported that 15 patients were transported to local hospitals with minor injuries. It is unclear at this time what caused the collision. Universal said in a statement, there was a tram incident at the theme park tonight that resulted in multiple minor injuries confirmed by the LA County Fire Department. We are working to support our guests and understand the circumstances that led to the accident. They were, of course, preparing for the 60th anniversary tram tour, and this was really right before the media night. So I think they might have canceled the media night about this. I'm not sure, but this was the debut of the new Glamour trams was supposed to happen at this time. There's been just a few updates on this, but we don't have too many specifics other than the update report from the police saying that the last car on the tram was struck a guardrail on the right side of the road as the tram was turning left onto Avenue M, just past the Jurassic Park cars. So it wasn't like they didn't hit another vehicle or whatnot. It was the tram just colliding with guardrails that caused it, and then the collision caused the car to tilt and eject multiple passengers from the tram. So the police are actually going to launch an investigation into this, and we'll hear, I guess, more later if anything new comes to light after the investigation. But they're going to be doing an investigation. They're going to reveal those findings to the public. I assume Universal is also going to do an investigation, but they haven't said too much. So that's what we know.
Well, yeah, and I think Universal in their statement did sort of allude to the fact that they were doing an internal investigation as well, and working with the external sources to make certain that investigation was the best it can be. I think the most important thing about this is, number one, there were no major injuries. It was minor injuries, and tilt and ejected. It sounds significantly less threatening than crash, but tilt and ejected guests doesn't make for a good headline. So,
especially for
I think
something that you're trying to promote as being the main attraction for your 60th anniversary for the Glamour. The timing was just bad.
Yes. Well, and I think that's what is really the most important thing about this story. Those of us in the industry, if we are not involved directly in the safety department, we always think of safety as being just the thorn in our side. It's like, oh my gosh, they always are telling us what we can't do and blah, 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 blah. But this is a perfect example of how the best laid plans can be completely uprooted by one minor safety infraction. And when I say minor, if any of the families of the people who were injured are listening, I don't mean that to downplay it or disregard it, but it, in the grand scheme of things, thank goodness no one was severely injured or worse yet, killed. But even just having people being dumped out of a tram car and having minor injuries and taken to the hospital is enough to undermine a very expensive reopening or celebration of their 60th anniversary. So, whenever the safety folks come to you and say, we can't do this, we can't do that, let's look at this, let's look at that, instead of looking at them going, oh my gosh, we have to do this, thank them for it. Thank them for it and get them involved early so that, you don't have to redo things later. Now, could this have been prevented? I have zero idea. I'm not part of the investigation team. I have no investigation information. So in this particular incident, I have no idea. But I think it's worth stating, especially in a show like this one, that if you are working in the industry, safety is always going to be job one, no matter where you work, no matter what you do. And this is why it can completely, even a minor incident can completely upend a very expensive and well planned out media launch or new event launch or promotional launch. And so embrace your safety people. Tell them thank you when they bring things to your attention. And what I've discovered has always worked really well, whether it was back in my Busch Gardens days or with my clients since then, is if there is a safety concern, go to the safety team and say, what can we get away with? Have a discussion with them, and not even get away with. What is a safe way to accomplish what we need to accomplish? Because even good safety people will tell you the safest way to run a park is not to open it. You'll have zero injuries. You'll also have zero profit. So you have to find those balances. You have to find those ways to work with the safety team and utilize their knowledge and their expertise so that you can, in the best of terms, avoid situations like this completely. And in the more difficult of terms, you know exactly how to handle it if something unexpected goes wrong because you've planned out, 5 other options, even though what really happened was number 6. You can at least have a working plan to get through it smoothly and with the least amount of personal injury, injury to scenic and hard goods, and media upheaval. So again, safety is not something that should be put on the back burner. It's something that should be on the front burner. And this is a perfect example as to why.
I have nothing to add, and I think that's fine. So I think we can move on. Move on.
because in other words, Scott, you've talked way too much about this one topic.
Well, I'm not going to. I would never say that, Scott. Of course, I would never say
no,
that.
but you're thinking it. You're thinking it, and that's okay.
Okay, story number 2. Disney World has cut a month from the Food and Wine Festival. So Disney World has cut a month from Epcot's Food and Wine Fest. They announced the dates for the 2024 Food and Wine Festival, which this year will start on August 29th and continue through November 23rd, which is a big change from 2023 when it started in the middle of summer and ran through November 18th. Of course, there's also menus and whatnot, but I don't want to talk about any of that. I just thought it was very interesting to have the discussion about the timing here. And I'm not sure if this is part of a larger strategy. Or, I think last year when the dates came out, we talked about how it's like they were trying to fill a whole new season with like food festival. Like, here's the food festival season. And it was a good, 3-month type of run. And we did recently talk about how Halloween was trying to become a 3-month thing, especially in the Orlando area with activity starting in August. So you have August, September, October. But is that too long? And is that why the scaling back, has it resulted in, I think, like festival, too many festivals, like festival overload to guests who are, like whenever they're there's a festival of some kind that involves food. So it becomes something that works against it, where there's no reason to really need to go because there's always food there.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It sounds to me, and again, I have no internal information that would lead me to be able to state this with a great deal of certainty. But it sounds to me as though they're trying to have a little bit of a palate cleanser, letting the park itself, without a festival overlay, be what it makes it unique for that period of time. It also may be something as simple as It's the way the calendar worked out. Or something as simple as this is when they could get the best bands for the concert series. Or
Yeah.
something as simple as they had to reduce their business planning chose to reduce the amount of money they were going to spend on concerts. So therefore, they had to have fewer. There's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of reasons for reducing this. I think that I love the phrase that you use, the sort of festival overload concept. I think that if people think there's always going to be something going on, then they have no impetus to go at a specific time. And I think that lighting that fuse, I think they're at least testing. I don't know. It appears to me as though they're at least testing the concept of, will we be able to get the same number of people in a more condensed, cost-efficient time period if we eliminate that 1 month in the summer? Because you know what, they don't need. I've been to Walt Disney World in the summer. They don't need to drive attendance in
Well, yeah.
in July.
See, that's exactly what I was
or
thinking.
August.
I was looking at these dates and I'm like, oh, basically this is Halloween at Epcot. Like, it's the very end of August.
Yeah.
And so it's still 3 months. So it's all of September, all of October, and basically all the way up until Thanksgiving. So this is Halloween at Epcot, and they've decided, because Halloween has been a shoulder season in the past. So I think they've decided, well, summer is fine. We don't need to bring people there in summer, but because of all the competing Halloween events happening around the area, maybe we need to have something for Halloween at Epcot, but it doesn't make sense to have Halloween. So we'll move Food and Wine. I mean, that's kind of
well, and since more and more, it's also Food and Wine, which targets, generally speaking, an older demographic. And since more and more schools are starting in August, I'm sorry,
you have to have money to buy the food and wine, and you have to be able to drink the wine.
Exactly. And since most schools, are now kicking up in August now, it just seems to make sense. I don't know. To me, this is a good thing to see. And they've got the what is it, Flower and Garden show that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And that will continue, and then there'll be a breath of fresh air, and then they'll kick into Food and Wine in August. And I think I think there's been sort of I think they keep trying to build these events, and as you say, we've gotten overload to the point where they're even overlapping, and that's happening not just at Disney parks, that's happening in other parks as well, where it's kind of like we're doing Oktoberfest on the weekends, but we're doing Halloween during the week, and we're doing Leaf Festival or whatever every other Thursday, and it just gets really overwhelming and confusing. So it's kind of too much of a good thing, and we have to right size it.
Speaking of right sizing, I'm not sure that I think that does work. So Universal has delayed the Donkey Kong roller coaster. You see, because you're right, because it's the mine coaster, and you're like right siding it.
That's a good attempt at a transition.
Okay, all right. Well, we're here. We have transition. So Universal Osaka announced today that it is delaying the opening of the Donkey Kong Country expansion of its Super Nintendo world until late 2024. The expanded land with its first-of-a-kind Minecart Madness roller coaster was scheduled to open this spring. I don't know. I mean, I think that's one of those things, maybe a little bit overlooked. To me, it's a similar story where I'm like, I think it might have been a little bit of an overload, where them kind of, I'm sure it is a build concern as well, but we've seen a lot of, delays here with the Mattel thing. There's just been a lot of delays all over still, which I think I think a lot of places haven't realized, the long-term impact of the pandemic, which is kind of what I'm getting at, which is, you're seeing these delays in big projects like this. And part of it is because there's still supply chains that have not recovered, up until now. And then we've been talking about even people not recovering in their traveling, but you also have, the planes and that infrastructure that hasn't recovered. And then on the supply side. So I think these are echoes of that. And I also think it's echoes of what we just talked about, which is, do you really need that much in the summer? I mean, that's the natural as people are returning back to their natural schedule, they want to do stuff in the summer. And I'm not sure that you need to position, your big openings there. So when you combine these two big forces, I think these delays I think we're going to see more of these is what I'm getting at. We're going to see more of, stuff being delayed just due to stuff out of the control. They can't secure the supplies as fast as they were able to do that in 2019.
I think you're absolutely 100% correct. And I think it is a major factor in this. I think we also have to take into consideration that, Universal's working on so many different fronts right now. I mean, they're just everywhere. So I think there's also that. So this truly is a right-sizing situation. Mm-hmm. It's right-sizing the expectations based on the production chain of getting stuff done. It's right-sizing the expectations of a monumental park who is doing everything, a monumental brand that is doing everything they can to expand and invigorate the guest park experience, and trying to do it all kind of at once. I will say, based on on the rumblings I'm hearing here in Florida, that other little thing that they're doing here in Florida, that Epic thing. Don't expect that to open fully and on time.
Yes.
Either.
We talked about that.
They're struggling.
We talked about that.
They're struggling, and they'll get it done. Don't misunderstand me. But again, it's that right sizing. Mm-hmm. It's that how can we right size? And this is happening not just in the attractions industry. I mean, we just last week or earlier this week we heard that Southwest is now no longer operating in 4 different airports. Yep. And what they claimed was the reason, and it may be, is that they're waiting on planes from Boeing because they can't get the planes to fill out the schedule. I think it's also a challenge with staffing, as we've talked about ad nauseum. This kind of thing, let me put it this way. It's probably driven by the fact that they can't get the parts and pieces or the labor that they need to get it installed on time. Yeah. But to your point, Philip, I don't think they're too stressed about it, because moving it to late 24 is just kicking the can down the road a little bit, and probably doing an opening ceremony in a much better time. Yep. That where they actually need the attention and they need the bump of attendance.
Yep. Well, speaking of places that actually don't want any more attention, it's a good transition. Yeah. Okay.
I'm with you. That's good.
That's good. Okay. So our next story is also in Japan. Actually, I didn't think about that when I placed it, but it's also in Japan, just a little bit different area. So there's a town in Japan that is setting up a blockade to block the view of Mount Fuji in response to over-tourism. A huge black barrier to block Mount Fuji from view will be installed in a popular photo spot by Japanese authorities, exasperated by crowds of badly behaved foreign tourists. So it's a mesh net. It's going to be 2.5 meters high by 20 meters wide, and it's going to begin next week, the construction on that. The officials for the town said that it's regrettable we have to do this because of some tourists who can't respect the rules, who've been leaving litter behind and ignoring traffic regulations. And it's the latest direct action in Japan against overtourism after residents of Kyoto's Geisha district banned visitors from small private alleys this year. They said this partly due to a record number of overseas tourists who are traveling to the country, where monthly visitors exceed 3 million in March for the first time ever. So this particular area, they tried traffic signs, they tried repeated warnings from security guards, and none of that apparently has worked. So as a last resort, the town decided on this huge screen. The article that we're linking to says that tourism to Japan has been booming since pandemic-era border restrictions were lifted, and the government has been working hard to boost visitor numbers, which we just talked about in other areas. But these have not been universally welcomed, including the Kyoto reference we mentioned earlier. There's also other things like the Mount Fuji, which is now charging foreigners to climb certain areas just because of the amount of congestion. So we've talked about this in not just Japan, but other areas, where it's like you have these competing interests a lot of times with areas where you definitely have the want, tourism is the hot thing that everybody wants. They want to bring in tourism and bring in especially high margin tourism. And in fact, there was an article recently by the Japan Tourism District saying they're trying to encourage more tourism, but like premium travel tourism, instead of the lower grade thing, which I think is, so it's like they want tourism, but they want this premium one, but there's a lot of smaller areas that people want to go to, again, see pandemic, encouraging people to go to small areas, but those smaller areas don't have the infrastructure, and not always the folks that, the locals that want that to happen, see, i.e. Disneyland previously, right? And the Anaheim locals not wanting to approve expansions in previous years. So just tourism forces are very interesting. And I think it's just interesting to see how the different areas react to this industry that we're in, because we always see the positive, right? We're always like, more tourism is a good thing. But in some cases, the locals don't like it.
Well, more tourism isn't a bad thing if there's the infrastructure to take care of it. And, I think this is a perfect example of the challenges. And again, I know I've worked on projects that were more successful than they were supposed to be, and we never thought that it would be causing traffic backups for miles and, that kind of thing. But so to me, this is just a reminder that, be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. If you want this kind of increased tourism and there is a town that is, the locals are opposed to it, make certain that you get them involved and figure out how they can benefit from it, because then they will become your greatest advocates. Yep. That's a perfect example. The idea here is the first thing I thought of was, well, gosh, if this were in the States, the first thing they would do is, instead of building a wall, they'd build a giant building that would block the view, but put a glass face on the side facing Mount Fuji.
Or like move merchants around, or do some sort of thing where you could get local, get to spend more. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's America, right? We're really good at making money.
We're really good at creating things that we think will make money. Let's put it that way, because we're also really good at spending a lot of money and then having things close, like we talked about in last week's show.
Well, we are still the best economy right now. Things that just close.
We are what?
We are the best economy of the G7 right now, coming out of the pandemic.
Well, that's true. That is very true. Yeah, it's and we're in a good place right now. I mean, despite what we see milling about, our economy, as you say, is in good shape. It's in really good shape right now. And so yes, you're absolutely right. That's probably where my capitalist thinking comes in. But I just think it's important. This is a good message for all of us. And that is, if you're looking for something that you think is going to be successful and impactful, don't just look at the microcosm, look at the macrocosm. I've had this discussion with a couple of my clients just within the last couple of weeks. And that is, you may find a perfect place to build a show. Make sure you got a place for an audience, and the same is true here. If you want to encourage more tourism to come see Mount Fuji, then make sure you've got ways to control the additional traffic that's going to create the desire in this particular case to stop. Maybe instead of investing in a wall, you invest in a pullout, so that people can pull off the road, get their photos, and then you can set up vendors and food trucks and benefit the local economy as well, using this giant natural wonder. But apparently they've tried all that, and the only thing they can think of to do is to put up a big black screen to block the view.
Yeah, it is difficult because I just find it so interesting that these places are trying to thread the needle so delicately. Like the tourism council trying to encourage premium traveling in other areas, and part of that plan is they even said that in the other article that I'll try and link to, hopefully, is the trying to encourage these premium travelers that spend more than $1 million of the Japanese dollar, but like it. Part of that challenge, they're like, we want to create, natural like Japanese experiences, but we're getting into the rural areas is difficult because of all the infrastructure is lacking. There's no hotels, blah blah. So it's difficult because, it's like it reminds me also of some of the challenges that theme parks face. Which is that if you're going to Japan, Mount Fuji is such a thing. Where like, how can you discourage people from, It's like, when people are going to Disney and they're like, well, I want to be able to see the Small World and the Matterhorn and the big three mountains. I mean, there's some iconic, like the castle. Like you want to go to Disney to be able to see the castle, right? It's like you want to, if you're going to Japan, Mount Fuji is a thing. I think a lot of people want to see in some way, but then they're like, well, we don't really want you going to rural areas, to crowd sidewalks to take photos, which is just, when you step back and think about this, the reality, it's so crazy that so many people want to get photos of Mount Fuji that they're going to this area just to stop and crowd a sidewalk to take photos. There's nothing to do. They're just taking photos, but there's so many that want it. They're crowding it. And then so many that want to climb the mountain it's too congested to climb. So they're trying to charge higher fees to just climb the mountain. So it's just, it's that interesting thing that we deal with all the time, where there's definitely iconic things that we use in our marketing to encourage people to attend our attractions. But then how do you manage that? And then what do you do when they're not available?
Right. Well, I mean, on a microcosm, I mean, I think back to when I worked in Williamsburg, Virginia, on the 4th of July, because that was the only time they used to do fireworks. But on the 4th of July, you could see the fireworks beautifully from the highway.
Mm-hmm.
So what the biggest challenge they had is people would just park on the shoulder along the highway to watch the fireworks. And they actually had to stop doing fireworks. They actually had to hold back on doing fireworks because it was creating a dangerous scenario out on the highways. I don't know exactly how they managed through that. But it's a perfect example of, well, gosh, here's a great way. And who doesn't want to see Mount Fuji? I mean, it is so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the top 3 visuals people outside of Japan think of when they think of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It's Mount Fuji. So you want to get the best picture of it, or you want to climb it, or you want to, experience it in some way. So, whether it is a natural attraction or an attraction that you control, just make sure that you have all the things in place to handle the crowds you're trying to get. And you're probably better off being out in front of it than being behind it. Because if you're behind it, then you have to take, like they're doing here, these stopgap measures of, well, we'll just make it so you can't see it from here.
Yeah.
Which seems to be the opposite of what I would want to do, and that is, let's build a place that you can see it, so you can pull right up in there and get your perfect shots. I'm not sure. I'm thinking that it's also financial.
Yeah.
I'm thinking putting up this giant mesh screen is going to be significantly cheaper than restructuring the roadways, and maybe that's a secondary plan. I don't know. But it certainly would be if it were in my books, because I've seen, in Caribbean islands, for example, they will have pull-offs for tour buses, where tour buses can pull off and get these beautiful views and vistas of the natural beauty that is on these islands, so that they don't have to get either blurry shots or pull over onto the non-existent shoulder in some Caribbean highways. So, this to me seems like either a last ditch or a stopgap until they can come up with a better solution.
Well, okay, I'm gonna try and fit one more story in here at the very end, and that's just to say that we got a little bit more news from the Peppa Pig theme park that's coming to Shanghai. We had heard about this, previously. It's been announced, but I think we are hearing a little bit more about it, which is encouraging, because we talked about how we're hearing less from China as they're trying to deal with their economy and get that figured out. So it's a little bit encouraging that we're starting to see news come out about the Peppa Pig park again. They just reiterated, I think, what we had heard previously. It'll be Hasbro's first park in Asia. It's a $331 million investment to cover approximately 48 acres. No details about what's going to be there. They just said it's going to have themed areas, rides, shows, hotels, all the stuff. The thing I thought was interesting, really, it's more just like interesting that we're seeing these announcements again, which is encouraging, but also interesting that they underscored that they said here, we're always looking to make sure that we adapt the local flavor and customs, making it appealing to local guests, but at the same time still highlight the elements of Peppa Pig. We're really excited about how we can actually adapt it for Shanghai and our Chinese fans. So I thought that was interesting that they're this is probably all political, right? That, making sure the announcement to be like, oh, things are still happening in China, but also, don't worry, it's going to be, adapted, to not, just like what we talked about, to not disrupt, too much of the local culture. So that was interesting.
Well, and let's be honest, people aren't going to go to, or at least I would not go to Shanghai to get a replica of the Peppa Pig park that I can get here in Florida.
Absolutely.
I would want that take. I would want that uniqueness. And I think that, with most countries that have a great deal of national pride, it's somewhat political, but I also think it's a wise choice from a tourism standpoint, because it gives people a reason to go specifically there, and not just to say, well, I'm not going to do Peppa Pig because it's exactly like the one in Orlando, and I live in Dunedin, so I'll just go over there. So I think it's a really wise idea, and I think it's a good choice. Speaking of good choice, it would be a good choice for us now to end our show, because that way we remain somewhat true to our title, Theme Park in 30. As usual, we've gone over just a shade, but that's all right. So I hope you guys are all having a great week. Please tell everybody about the show, anybody that you think might be of interest. I can't tell you how many people that I work with who don't know about the show yet. And the moment I let them know and give them a link and send them on their way, they become regular listeners. So I really appreciate all of you who are listening now. So share the love, and hopefully we'll get continue to increase our listenership. On behalf of Philip Hernandez with Gantom Lighting and the Haunted Attraction Network, and myself, Scott Swenson with Scott Swenson Creative Development, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, and we'll see you next week.